Welcome to Story Hour, a virtual meetup hosted by Wolf and Heron.
My senior year in high school, I took second place at states for springboard diving. That helped set me up to be recruited to Cornell University. To be frank, going to an Ivy League university hadn't even been on my radar as a possibility, but they wanted me. Let's just say I quickly felt like pretty hot stuff and smart enough to play in the big leagues. Fast forward to junior year, I stepped out of a Cessna onto a dirt runway, Costa Rica. I'm here for the entire summer. I'm not just in San Jose or some touristy beach town, but primary growth rainforest. And I'm getting paid. Did I mention all summer? Roll out the red carpet, ladies and gentlemen, because I have arrived. So off the plane, I went straight into the jungle on a 4x4, driven by what looks to be Crocodile Dundee. Rough track roads, stream crossings, the whole bit, right out of a movie. And then bam, like a brick wall, my high-flying Cornell attending, I'm going to work international self got smacked square between the eyes. For the next 9 weeks, I was just about stepped on. No one cared that I went to Cornell or that I knew all these things about revenue management, housekeeping ratios. I met the 3rd, 4th, and 10th employees who had family working there for literally generations, and they knew things. They had lived things. I realized there was more to be learned from listening than yapping on about spreadsheets and numbers. Heck, learning a second language in Spanish wasn't glamorous or easy. It was pretty isolated, to be honest. I was the only American there, which on paper meant I wouldn't be tempted to hang out with other English-speaking Americans. What that actually meant was I didn't know what the heck was going on half the time, and learning how to say, I'm hungry, needed to happen fast. And the other thing that's funny about rainforests is it rains, like a lot. So there I'd be every night, walking back to my room, flashlight in hand, for fear of stepping on some sort of venomous snake or spider the size of my hand. With the generator powering our little cluster of employee rooms long shut off, I'd be greeted each evening with a damp, dark, dirt floor bunk. Head on the pillow, exhausted from days that began at dawn when the neighboring rooster decided it was time. I'd fall asleep to the metal roof's pitter-patter, only to occasionally be visited by the bat I had for a roommate. Back on campus, amongst our fancy Gothic architecture and complaints about the cafeteria's daily special, my newfound humility came with better understanding of who I was and how much I had to learn. Having since lived and worked in Canada, Mexico, Argentina, and Australia, it's enabled me to appreciate what I have and how much is left to learn and experience.
Yeah! Okay. Thank you, Andrew. Good first try. Okay. So what was super powerful about Andrew's story? What worked? Okay, I'll start. I found it hilarious. It was extremely funny. I was laughing at many, many moments. And I think that was in part because of your delivery. You handle sarcasm very well. And so I could feel that, and it was very effective. And so I was like totally in it and laughing all the way through. Go ahead, Bart. We'll start with you.
I liked it because let's face it, all of us can relate. You know, at some point in time in our lives, we thought we were the bee's knees. And at some point in time, somebody cut those knees out from underneath us, and we had to figure it out. So yeah, no, it's very relatable, very, very sound and your delivery. Well, your use of imagery, and really describing, like, yeah, it's hard. Like, I've spent time in the jungles. I used to own a property in the old growth jungles down there and built tree houses and stuff. It's brutal environment, and so I could totally imagine your dismay of like, dude, what have I got myself into? So good on you.
Yeah. Kara.
I really enjoyed the guts of a story like this. It's a story about somebody getting knocked back and being humbled. And that's just fascinating. Yes, like Bart said, it's relatable, but it's just like fun stuff to listen to. And it also makes it really desirable. It like makes it, we can root for you, right? Because it's not like you're just on the top of the mountain. You come off the mountain and then we're like, oh, like it's exciting to see somebody like that admit that and then want them to climb back up the mountain in a different way. So just stories like this, I think, are really compelling to share. And you also had, like, you thought about details, right? Like walking back, the flashlight, right? You really tried to paint a picture for us. And I loved that about your story.
Neha and then Tom.
Yeah, I thought it was lovely. Like Kara and Stephanie and Bart have said, like the details were fantastic. The humor was amazing. And I feel like it's particularly relevant to like my field as well, because like I work in design. And so everything right now is about listening, but even more broadly than that, it's really, really a good topic for right now, because we're learning there's so much to be found in, like you said, listening to people and hearing other people's stories and not always assuming that you have all the right answers. So I thought it was really, really well done.
Mm-hmm. Tom, welcome.
Thank you. I love the images of the story. I could just see it happening in my mind. I'd make up my own picture show of what was taking place. And the journey from arrogance to humility to insight, it teaches me something about how I want to live my life too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, lovely. Okay. What are some experiments that Andrew can try to make the story more compelling, more influential?
You know, the thing I'd like to hear is, and it's kind of me a little bit, is you talked really fast.
Mm.
And I'd like to see variation in how it goes. And it started running together. Now, yes, I have a hearing issue, but I probably wouldn't be the only one if you ever tell the story on stage or something. Mm-hmm. And I knew you were reading it, and we tend to read it really fast and not have any inflection. But I think inflection or variation in tone would work really well with this story, because you can pause. Pause is great. And so especially when it was a point you were trying to make, I'd like to pause and have us say, oh, you know, and I heard that it changed you, but I didn't hear how.
Okay.
I don't know if it was there or not, because you talk so fast. You know, when you start out and you were confident or a little bit naive and whatever, and then, you know, you might want to go back there, you know, to somehow connect the ending and the beginning, how you were and now how you are, how you changed. But that's it, and pauses. Thanks.
Yeah, I want to add to that too.
Go ahead.
Also, just one more thing that you did really well is that you did fit a lot of information into such a short story, and it felt really cohesive and really tight, which is amazing. Because like thinking about it now, like the diving thing is very, very different from being in Costa Rica. I think it was Costa Rica, right? And and like that didn't feel at all disjointed anyway. But I was going to say, yeah, I think I would love to hear like a bit of an example of, for me in particular, like maybe what you learned from one of the folks who had been there for generations, who had generations live there. I would love to see something that they taught you contrasted with, you know, what you were bringing to the table, and how that really shifted your thinking. I think it's helpful information for the story, and it's also really cool for people to hear what kinds of contributions and what kinds of things other people are thinking about. And I think a small example, like after you got back as well, or today, you know, when you think about that story and what you learned from it, a more recent example would be really helpful as well.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Whoa. Okay, Bart, go ahead.
One thing I would mess around with, and I'm always pushing people to do this, is it might not, you're very chronological with everything, right? It was like, I went to college, I went here, I did this, I went back, blah, blah. It might be cool to start off with the shock factor of showing up. Like, what did that feel like when you showed up? And then you can run back of like, you have to realize I'm coming from this like privileged little guy, you know, diver who got a scholarship and went to Princeton or, you know, whatever, whatever it is, right? You know, like this. And then now I'm in this situation that I find myself, right? You know, and I agree that we, you know, having something of a little bit more substance of like where it brought you. Like where did you end up and how did that really affect you and how does it affect you today type of thing would be cool. Yep.
Kara.
So I agree with folks that are suggesting to explore, you know, is there another moment that you could expand upon from your time on the trip to show versus tell that you shouldn't be so confident. And one other thing that I noticed that happens sometimes with folks, happens with me, happens with Stephanie and lots of people is when you're working on a story and in the process of working on it, you write it down. Your cadence when you're writing is different than cadence in a conversation or a presentation. And sometimes you want to have a written cadence and sometimes you want to have a verbal cadence, but it's just something to pay attention to. Like we tend to have shorter sentences when we're speaking, fewer quirky adjectives, for example. So just something to think about and consider depending on where you may go share the story in the future. One thing that you can do is if you have a written story that you want to share verbally, read it and record a voice note, and then just listen to the voice note, not looking at the words, but listen to it and hear if there's anything that doesn't sound like what you would normally say, and think about how you might phrase that in a more natural way for conversation.
Sarah.
Yep.
I loved your story. I agree. Super relatable. And I loved the little details that you peppered in, the dirt floor and the bat. One thing
I saw your face, Sarah, when you mentioned the bat. I saw you like,
not a fan of bat, but I think like your point was crystal clear, like what happened in your growth. But I think there's like really cool opportunities if you wanted to kind of tinker with the story to give other voices. So you could have the native Costa Ricans explaining how naive you were in that growth, but maybe your coach diving, explaining how amazing you were a god. You could have the bat, give the bat a voice and have him help you explain, this crazy guy just can't figure it out. And I see him falling. I think there's a like fun little opportunity if you wanted to kind of tinker with it and, could be super expressive.
Yeah, add some characters. That makes the delivery a lot more challenging, but also more fun. Yeah. If you have dialogue and different characters.
You already had that humor, and so it kind of like punches that too. That was great.
Okay.
The opportunity that I would offer for you to play with is to think specifically about engage emotion. I felt a lot of things, and yet I think you can punch it up even further with descriptions of the physiology. So you talk about walking back in the dark with the flashlight and the rain and the bat and the dirt floor, and being exhausted. And yet, like, what does that feel like? Is it like back pain? Is it achiness? Is there, are you like the humidity I'm imagining is part of it, and stickiness? Like, can you bring physiological experience to the descriptions of your stories? Like, walking onto campus, and being this god, you can describe your walk, right? And the body experience of being on top of the world. And I think that will help us as an audience member feel your journey as well. Just literally feel it in our bodies. Other thoughts, other experiments.
Don't hold back.
just because Stephanie just brought it up, but for the like walking like a god, you don't always have to say things too. Some of it can, and I think actually you did this a little bit, can just be like leaning back and like the sun is shining on your back and slowing down your voice. I mean, we've talked about adding some of those dynamics in, but you can show those emotions even if you're not saying them, just by considering what's my pace, what's my pitch, are my shoulders really tight? Am I crouching up because I'm like cold, or is it like it's so hot, and like all you have to do is go like that to help us feel like we're more immersed in a way.
Visit wolfandheron.com to find out more about our story hours.